Plate loaded shoulder presses, especially on machines like this where it has a close grip handle and wider handles, which one do you use? This is all dictated by how much range you have in your shoulder. So Conor, if you want to set up to the wider handles, and then can you put your hand away from them? So there's a shitload of range there, so you can use those handles.
I've got to check both sides of that as well. So I've got slightly less on my left in terms of that movement of external rotation than I do on my right. So it's worth checking both sides and go with the worst side. And obviously, if you didn't have the range there, if you were like, what's it like for you? Jump on.
So for me, I definitely do not. Well, somewhat. I've got a bit there, but it doesn't feel comfortable at all. Yeah. So it comes down to preference at the end of the day.
I won't lie, for me, when you put a lot of weight on that as well, that doesn't feel particularly good. And then a lot of people probably, when they use those handles, because it's closer to the axis, actually you've got less mechanical advantage there. So actually, if you're using these handles, it's like using a wheelbarrow almost, isn't it?
You can lift a lot more load than
so is that. Like that's a class 2 lever as well. But like these are closer than M1s, aren't they? So like you'll move more weight with these front ones, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's more challenge, does it? That's it. Obvious stuff comes into it. But so you wouldn't necessarily use these handles yourself?
For me, not my left shoulder, it does not feel comfortable with the pressing load there, but these handles feel fine. You're still getting from down, a little bit of inclined chest.
That's what I was going to say, because that's a concern for a lot of people, is like if we don't use these handles, are we still training the front delt? And we are, because like whether James's arm is out here, the thing that's going to be on top of the axis is going to be the front delt, and when his arm's here, it's still the front delt. It's still the same thing. You're still taking it from a lengthened position into a more shortened position as you come up and in. It's just in a different position. This isn't really any different to this as far as your front delt is concerned. There is obviously, from a joint perspective, from what your ligaments are doing, or the plastic tissues are doing, there is a difference. But for your front delt, it doesn't really make a difference. So if this is more comfortable and if it's a safer position that you're going to be able to progress for longer without getting injured, probably better to use it, I would say, in a lot of things. But there's nothing wrong with these either. If this feels comfortable for you, then go for it. It absolutely works.
And another thing to think about is your rib cage angle. So if you're really flaring that rib cage up and thinking about where those, like your pecs, are in relation to that. So if I flare my rib cage up, then the more sternal sort of fibers come into play. When we are pressing, we are recruiting somewhat of the whole pec, depending on the angle. See the less costal fibers, the lower pec. But yeah, there's that to think about as well. Your delts are still going to work in even on flat pressing as well. So.
You'll find that a lot of people will really try and arch like that, really like you say, get your rib cage up nice and high. And sometimes that will be to make it easier to try and get a bit more pec involvement in that. Again, if we're using this exercise to try and bias our delts, we potentially don't want that. So it depends on what you're trying to get out of the exercise. I actually used this machine the other night. I used it as an incline press. So I set myself up in a way that you can do that. So don't think that when you see this machine, it just means, all right, that's a shoulder press and that's it. You know, that you can manipulate these machines sometimes to get what you want out of it. So
if you've only got like this available, then I definitely recommend that. So literally sitting, scooting your ass further down the seat, leaning back, maybe putting a pad there behind you for a bit more support.
That's exactly what I've done actually.
Incline chest, still getting like sternal fibers, a little bit of costal fibers, front down. But this, more upright, bit more front down, bit more of those clavicular upper chest fibers.
It was, for me, I was going to do a cable press, like an incline press, and someone was on it, so that was my solution. To do that instead. What's quite cool about this machine as well is the fact that we've got like the load right here, and the load goes on that peg there, and then there's also this like thing that like attaches onto the arm that we're pressing onto. So as we go through this motion, we are pressing into the machine either here or here. So when we push here, we've got more advantage. We've got slightly less advantage here, but we've always got more advantage on the load, which is attaching here. Then it takes you down to this lever that the load's on. And that's a lot shorter than the lever that we're pushing. So even if you really push that up really fast, there's not a lot of momentum in that. You use some shoulder presses, if you were to blast them up, there'd be a lot of kind of hamstring ones. Yeah, the hamstring ones, there'd be a lot of momentum in the movement. And then what that means for you is it gets really hard at some points and really easy at other points because you're essentially throwing it about. But you can get away with that. Like with a lot of one clients that use this, I'll tell them to explode up in that first one. the hint in the name, Nautilus Xpload, doesn't it?
It's going to be harder to control that load when there is more momentum inertia. There's going to be more momentum inertia on those hammer strength pieces compared to this. That weight's moving less distance than what we're moving through, so we can move it a little bit faster and get away with that.
So these are really cool pieces from that point of view as well. Yeah, the only downside of this piece, in my opinion, is like the seat just like slants down a little bit, doesn't it? Like it's aiming their own way almost. But apart from that, it's a great shoulder press. Probably one of my favourites out there. The only other thing to add to this that we were just talking about as well is the fact that when we're talking about checking your range on this, like in that position, the bigger you are, the larger a human being you are, the more tissue you've got here, the further forward your starting point is going to be, and the further back you'll have to be able to externally rotate to achieve that position. So that was something that just came across our minds when we were talking about that there. It's like, again, if you're JP, for example, I can't say it, if you're JP, trained by JP, well, he's a big bastard, big thick bastard, so like, he's going to need to get more external rotation to get into that handle than I am. I mean, I'm not that far behind in terms of depth, but yeah, he's going to need a hell of a lot more than I am. So just another consideration for these pieces.
Probably someone like him who is like a larger individual,
yeah,
he might be able to scoot a bit further down and get a bit more external rotation by setting up his torso and ribcage angle. From there, he's still going to get it from down and he's going to fit into the machine better. So,
and that would, for like people who are like PTs and things like that would happen with your client who's just overweight as well. It's the same sort of thing. So looking at the individual, looking at those ranges applicable to the exercise. But yeah, that's well, I was going to call it the hammer stretch there, you got me confused there. That's a Nautilus Xpload, in this case the cockpit of the Nautilus Xpload.